Okay. There we go. So whoever wants to have a look at this can, and it'll be there for Paul. So how have you got on? So I know for you three, we sort of postponed the tutorial because of where you all were with the modules, and that's fine, because I'm a strong believer of there's no point, pushing water uphill if we haven't got the right receptacles to do it in. So if we've not done it, we've not done it. So that's fine. But you're all up to date now in terms of having completed the Milton model, up to the end of the Milton model, haven't you? So yes. Oh, here we go. Here's Shireen. Right, I'll just let her connect, and then right. So hopefully, Shireen, you can hear us. You're just coming online. Hello, brilliant. So we're just saying that everybody's pretty much got to the end of the modules of the Milton model. We literally have just started talking about it. So you've missed nothing. We're on record because Paul is obviously away. So we'll just kind of like carry on from there, and then, and then we'll catch up with you in a little while. So, obviously, I'm interested in your thoughts, your observations, your questions from having done those modules, how you found the learning of it, how you have been able to integrate it in your day-to-day. And then we'll have a little think about some of the, maybe real life situations that you might have that you might want to bring. So, who would like to go first, or bring something to the table regarding your learning?
I don't mind. I'll go first. I don't mind.
Yes.
I've got through the modules. Yes. The Milton model.
Yeah.
I really like it.
Yeah.
And I'm understanding it, but I am conscious. My notes. I'm referring to my notes all the time. So at the moment, my action is really listening and reading things that people are sending me, so emails and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I look at my notes, and then I'm correlating as to how that's my level, really. I've got no instantaneous, like,
yeah,
oh, that's that. If that makes sense in a conversation.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's perfect. And actually, so it is that thing of, so if we think about the steps to learning, and we think about how we kind of like go through that process, when we learn anything, and especially this new language, because everybody has been talking, speaking, listening since very early on. And so now what's happening is you're looking at a new way of, oh, that's really interesting, what's actually being said beneath the surface, as it were. And so it's almost like you've gone from unconscious competence, where you're good at what you're doing, all the way back to sort of like being consciously incompetent at what we're doing. So it becomes very clunky, and that's perfectly normal. And so I think however you all as individuals find to learn it, that's absolutely fine. I do think the listening, the reading, and then referring and going, oh, that's interesting, that's how the structure of this goes, because really, in a way, it's a little bit about the semantics. It's how everything is put together. It's about the grammar, and how that's put together. And sometimes you might look at it and go, that doesn't meet grammatical rules. And as you'll probably know from your learning, Vanessa, in your looking at the brain stuff in your psychology, is we don't work actually on grammatical rules. We might look at it in terms of it consciously and go, oh, that grammatically doesn't make sense. But how our brain actually works is on plausibility. So if a sentence sounds plausible, we can actually go with it. And that's why when you see things like, sometimes things get sent around on social media and people have missed out loads of letters in words, and you can read it and they say, oh, if you can read this, you're in the top 95% of the blah, blah, which, it's to lure you in to read it. However, the reason we understand it is because our brain just picks certain bits out and fills in the blanks. So it goes back to the deletion, distortion, and generalization that we looked at from the communication model, that, you know, we are very capable as human beings of basing things on deleted information and just filling in the blanks. And so if we think about that in terms of plausibility, and you know, if you hear somebody as you are, you're listening to it, you're reading it, when we first read it straight off, if it's plausible, we may very well go with it. We may accept the presupposition that is in the sentence. And then when we look at it in what I think of as, like, you know, conscious uptime, so we're analysing it then and going, okay, so what does this sentence mean in terms of the Milton model, which is, you know, very much about us making sense about it. Then we're filling in the gaps, and then we're looking at it. And it's probably at that point when we go, oh, well, that doesn't make grammatical sense, or that's a really weird sentence. But when we just listen to it or hear it unconsciously, it just, you know, we go, yeah, absolutely, and we go with it. So I think that's a really good way of doing it, you know, to listen and read and just analyze it, because to use it, you don't necessarily need to know the name of a sentence, what it's called. You just need to be able to use it. And in order for us to be able to use it well, we need to learn them well. You know, so that's the reason, you know, I would keep banging on about stick with the language, keep sticking with the language, especially the Milton model, because everything else falls into place afterwards. It's like really easy after that. So is that other people's experience of how you're going about learning it as well?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, that was pretty much exactly what it was like for me. I think I'd need to, I definitely need to, because there was just a lot of information for me, and what I need to do, and I had a look at the book that you recommend, the 21 like most impactful speeches or whatever, and I think I need to have a look at that, and then also look at like other texts from politicians or watch interviews and so on, and then just wrap my head around it that way before I can sort of almost do before I do the activities that were laid out at the end, because right now it's a lot of information, and I'm also referring to my notes quite a bit, so that's where I am right now. But I do have a question, actually. When it comes to the patterns, and you obviously have complex equivalent patterns and universal quantifiers and so on, and so they're all like subheadings, they're all types, and then we have the examples. Do you think we should, like, when we study or when we identify these patterns, when we're reading or someone's talking to us, should we be able to go, oh, that's this pattern and this is why, or just the idea around it and the sort of sentence structures?
Well, that depends on what you want to do with it. So so for me, because I've always trained and I've taught and I've done that, I knew very quickly early on that I would want to incorporate this in what I taught. So I knew I needed to know the names of things. So you almost have to learn it at a different level. However, to use it, you don't need to know the label. But the thing is, and this is the tricky thing about learning it. So in an ideal world, we would learn the Milton model unconsciously. We'd let it all kind of like filter in, and we'd start to use it very impactfully. If we can't separate different ones out, when we come to use it, we might not know. So you mentioned complex equivalence. So how we really look at it is the sentences like complex equivalence, cause and effect, mind reads, lost performatives, all of the distortions offer us the biggest impact to pick apart. And the reason I say that is, if you think about it, so a distorted sentence will change the meaning a lot, a generalized statement will become very, inclusive of lots of things, and it becomes a little bit woolly. And then a deleted statement misses out lots of information. Now, a sentence may have a number of those in. So, you could have a cause and effect that also has an unspecified verb in there, and lots of other sort of like minor ones. What we want to be able to do is we want to be able to pick out the distortion. And in order to pick out the distortion, it's almost worth, it is worth learning them as they are so that you could name them, because you become a lot more effective in their use. So take, for example, the cause and effect and the complex equivalence. They are very similar to the heard word and the spoken word. And in many ways, if you are the listener of that sentence and you wanted to question it, you'd question both of them in the same way, pretty much. If you want to use them, you use them in a different way. So for example, both the cause and effect and a complex equivalent have two sides to the sentence. There's a something and then a something, and it's joined with the small words that go in the middle. So a cause and effect, would say something like, if you learn this well, then you will become an expert of language. Now, when you hear that, where does that send your brain in terms of time?
Long. You have to take the time to learn it. A while, you have to take the time to learn it. It indicates you need time to do this. It's not going to be by tomorrow.
Yeah, so there's time. So that cause and effect puts a time thing in it. Now, a complex equivalence could have a similar thing. And if you said something like, if you're learning this well, you are good at it.
Okay, so you could be already there.
Yes, exactly. So you've got these kind of like different things. So if you were doing a speech, you were doing a talk to your athletes, you were working with a client, it depends what you want them to do. And if you want them to do something in the here and now, or think about something in the here and now, you're linking the two parts of the sentence together in a way that means they hear it in the now and they act on it now. Whereas if you want them to do something in the future, you link it in a slightly different way to project it into the future. Now you can mix the two up, and that's what we do, because in normal language, we kind of we talk generally, we don't think about these things. And then suddenly when we look back afterwards, we recognize what we've done. In order to be able to separate those out, personally, I think it is worth being able to name them for now, simply because then you'll become much more adept at being able to pick them out. I mean, I wouldn't get kind of like my knickers in a twist if you kind of went, oh gosh, I want to use a cause and effect and I've just used a complex equivalence, because I got the names wrong. It's more about the learning of it so that you become very good, so you can pick it out, not so much when you're listening, because the questioning will come quite easily. It'll be more how you use it in your spoken language to other people, in terms of what message do you want to send so that it lands with them and they run with what you are saying.
And how is this, or maybe not, impacted by the language we use when we've previously talked about internal representation systems?
Yeah.
How do the two of them link together?
Yeah, so it in some ways it makes no difference. And what you will hear is you'll hear people saying things using their internal representations. So you will be picking up the way they put the sentence together, and in that they could have their internal representations that you also pick up on. They could tell you a lot of content or not much content. You know, it'll be mixed up. So they're linked, but they're separate, which I know sounds a little bit a strange way of saying it, but it makes no odds in terms of what your preferences are in terms of your internal representations to how you use the sentence, except that, you know, you probably, the words that are said within the sentence may be different for say a visual person as opposed to a kinesthetic. Yeah.
Cool.
Can I ask you to repeat, if you can, just off the top of your head, your version of the complex equivalence of if you practice this, you will get good at it? How did you phrase it again?
So if you're practicing this,
yeah, in the present continuous. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
Then you are, and it's the middle words really that make it, put it in the now. You know, or you could change the beginning, and you could say, because you're practicing this, you're already good.
Yeah, it's the present continuous form. Yes. At the beginning, that makes the difference. Yes. Because it's not when you learn it, which is future, it's when you are at, like, if you're practicing, because that shows that you're doing it.
Yeah.
And so it's immediately in there.
Yeah.
Okay,
but,
cool.
But it's definitely the words in the middle. It's
also, yeah, sure.
Yeah. You know, so, and especially with athletes, and so you might say something like, when you're sitting there and you're talking to your players or whatever, you might say, you know, we've been doing loads of training and we've noticed the difference already. So the more you train, the more you'll improve in this area. And in fact, the more you have been training, you know, the more we can see those impacts now, you know. So that's more of a natural way of talking, but actually you're mixing in both the complex equivalence and the cause and effect in that little paragraph, really. And once the whole thing about how you say something is based on the listener accepting your presuppositions and going with it, nodding along. So even if afterwards they analysed it back and they went, well, actually, that's probably not true, it comes back down to that plausibility thing. Does it sound like what this person is talking about makes sense in the context that I'm in? Yeah. And the less content you put in there, the more Milton model patterns put together. The same Milton model patterns said in the same way can be used in different contexts. So the sentence that I just said to you is, you know, we could say something like, so there's less content in here. We could say, because we've been doing this for a while, we're all getting better. And because we're getting better, because we've been practicing, we can see the results already. Yeah. Now, there is no content really in that says what I am talking about. So I could be talking to a load of guys on a shop floor who are drilling, you know, machine parts. And those words would make the same sense to them as it would to a bunch of athletes. Because, of course, when you're in that context and somebody's talking to you about what you're doing, they assume, because it's plausible, that you are talking about what they're doing. And this is where becoming good at the Milton model and being quite vague about the language that you have means that you can adapt it to any context that you are in. Yeah. And that just adds to your command of your ability to be able to persuade people, you know, or to promote your ideas or whatever it is that you want them to buy into. Yeah.
I have a question that may not relate to us really, but just out of curiosity, when it came to the section on syntactic pattern of a sentence, and about question, statement, and command, how is that impacted when someone, like Americans, for example, tend to go up at the end of a lot of sentences, and same with Australians. So doesn't sound like a statement, sounds more like a question.
Yeah.
How is NLP generated, or is that part sort
Part
of
of it, yeah.
adjusted?
Yeah, that's why Antipodeans are often kind of seen as being like friendly, happy people, because that kind of like questioning at the end is very non-threatening.
Mm.
You know, so you know, if you think about it, so especially for females, sorry, Paul, I know you'll be watching this, but especially for females, what women can pay attention to in terms of this is by adopting either, you know, a statement or a command where you drop it at the end. It gives you more authority, which is unconscious. So if you were doing a speech, let's say you were talking in front of a group of guys, you know, in sport. So, you know, those of you that have worked in sport, as I have for many, many years, is quite often, you know, I can stand in front of a group of 20, 30, 40 people and there'll be no female in there. And so you need to kind of, you know, I suppose, stamp your authority quite early on in the situation. And especially when you are talking to a group of people who know their stuff and you're coming in to talk about something that they can use, and maybe they're a little bit, you know, not so, maybe they're a bit closed-minded to it at the start. So by using things like dropping off at the end of the sentence when you are saying things, sends an unconscious message that you are in command, that you know what you are talking about, rather than you know what you're talking about. Because the last one makes you sound unsure. So the going up at the end, whilst it's very friendly, does send a message that says, not so sure about this. They sound a little, you know, unconvinced. So it's something I would definitely practice if it's something that you're not used to. Also, other things that go along with that are what we do with our hands. So if you're doing a talk, you know, for, again, similar kind of group, is with, for women, I would definitely try and avoid showing the palms of your hands, because that's just like a supplication. It's like, sorry, not quite sure. Yeah. So hands down.
But the other way is okay. No.
Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You can even do that one. No, and
Sorry.
I felt like it many times, but yeah,
Sure.
but it goes along with that. So there's lots of other kind of like physiology ones. What annoys me is watch the politicians next time on the TV. So you can make a point about what you're doing. And if you make a point where it seems quite natural, nobody will notice. But you watch some of them and they do this and they punctuate what they're saying. And some of them punctuate slightly the wrong time. So their hand movements, it's almost like they're going, oh, I need to do this because this shows that I'm in command and I am, you know, punctuating the things that I say because this is what I want you to hear. And if they don't do it in a natural way, it looks bloody awful. So it goes back to that kind of, you know, how we gain rapport with somebody. So it very, very loose conversation around this, but with the command, also think about keeping your palms out the way, you know, because we want to sort of like send that message that we absolutely know what we're doing, even if inside you're thinking, fuck, I have no idea what's going on. Because that does happen to all of us at some point in time, for sure. So yeah, have the others had a look at that syntactic up, statement down, and thought about how you might use that?
Sorry, I was just telling my children to get off the internet.
I hope you used a command statement.
I did. I said, are you on the internet? And they said, yes. And I said, you need to get off.
Yeah, now. Yeah. Yeah, anybody else had tested it out to see the impact?
Yeah, I have to say I was not super into it at the beginning, in the way that I just found it to be rhetoric-y. And I was like, oh God, this is why we have Donald Trump, is because people fall victim to this, like, oh, join me in this, I'll say a word salad of nothing that sounds great and commanding and everybody will believe me. And I was like, oh, what is this going to be about? And then I did the activity and I looked at it and I analyzed some of the nicest, messages that I've received from people in leadership. And one of the ones that I just sent out to the national team, welcoming them onto the team and preparing them for World Championships in 2 months. And I was like, hot damn, if people who are communicating well positions of leadership don't do exactly this, you have to start by convincing people why what you are going to say is important. And you can do that by bringing them all in, and you need to do this. You can't just start and say, we're going to be arriving on this date, we're going to win this competition, we're going to do that. But they'll just be like, am I coached by a robot? So it's very important to convince even, whatever, like my bosses to say, okay, I want us to arrive on the 12th. Like I'll say, okay, the team needs to be together for reasons of, we all know what it's like to be on a team where nobody knows who's coming and going, and to create exactly the bond that we want, I would like the team to be there by the 12th. And it's like an easy way, and people are immediately convinced. And that's very much using these, initially the Milton, and then subito, immediately into the details for those types of messages. Okay. So I just found it very useful in the activity part. And it was interesting to read it, but I was sort of like, am I just going to be like, Donald Trump Jr., like inspiring people with like nothing behind it,
Yeah.
So I'm sure.
And I think this is the key thing about this, isn't it? So all of these skills that we are learning are ways to present our authenticity and our knowledge better. So, some people will be vacuous, aka Mr. Trump, and have nothing behind the message, and use some things that might be told to work. Others will be very effective because what they're doing is tweaking little things to, so the detail that we talk about is the conscious stuff that people will pick up on. The way we present it will be the unconscious stuff that comes with the use of the Milton model, and whether we make it a statement or whether we make it a command. If we want to use, where it goes up and it's questioning, we can, because it's a very good way of, so when you think about things like tag questions, along your lines there, Shireen, is you could say, yes, in the past, we all know what it's like coming and going. So in order for us to work better as a team quicker, I'd really like for everybody to come together, on these dates, because that will be greater cohesion. And in the long run, it will be better results, won't it? And then you can use the tag thing on the end that leaves it open. It's a question, and everybody goes, yes, absolutely, it will. That's what they want. And then bang in the detail.
Yeah, because then they immediately start. I think it's similar to when you ask a group of people a question at the beginning of something. You say, how many blah, blah, blah. You ask them a question and immediately they're into it. And asking that little tag question at the end brings them back into it and saying, oh, I guess it will make it better, instinctively, even if they might not agree, at least they'll be rethinking that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
The tag question one was super interesting because it made me think. I just became very conscious of it, and like listening to other people use questions at the end, and just thinking, wow, I do just agree with everything that's said if someone asks a question at the end. It's like, especially, I know so many people are like, blah, 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 right? And like, without having actually thought about it.
Absolutely. And great that you are noticing it and picking it up in everyday conversation, because I think that's where this learning's coming up in, because it goes, oh yeah, there's one of those, or that's what's happening. Or another way of doing it is when you just listen to something and you go, ooh, it's something in there, you'll be able to look at it and go, or replay it back to yourself if that's possible, and go, that they've been using this.
Yeah, and I think that's just going back to what we were talking about at the beginning. That's where I'm trying to get to, and why I'm trying to kind of I mean, I guess this is just the way I learn, clearly, but just doing as much reading as I can, identifying on papers, and then it just, I have that repetition that gets stored in my unconscious mind. So then when I actually do speak to someone and they are, talking back to me, I can actually identify them and go, okay, that's this one, and then.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Daniela, how have you got on with it in terms of usage?
Quite, in terms of what everyone's been saying, quite similar. I think I'm kind of with the patterns. I think, like Arabella was saying, it's knowing them. I feel like I'm having to listen to the audio parts. I've got them on kind of replay, in terms of trying to identify the language. I think one of my problems is that, I know I said at the start, I've been going out over the past couple of weeks, but aside from that, it sounds really, really sad, but I don't really have many conversations during the day like this and with people. Yes. A lot of the text conversations that I have maybe with like clients, it's very just like short stuff. It's not really, it's just instructions basically of tasks that I need to do. So I'm not, I know it sounds so sad, doesn't it? It sounds like I'm a very happy person. And then it's difficult doing it with my partner because he knows why I'm trying to do it, and it's almost like it's forced.
Yeah.
And so one of my questions really would be, is there any I guess videos, or I don't know if there's like a
watch the TV.
Yeah. Is that, I feel like is there anything though that like for example the Milton model, seeing it in practice in an NLP session, in an actual.
Well, the thing is, so if you play this back, you'll hear it happening. You'll hear the patterns that we've used. They'll be in there. And the best way I think of doing it is not listening to somebody necessarily who's doing that, is sit and listen to just a little bit on the TV and start to just analyze bits, or download a YouTube video of somebody interviewing somebody.
Yeah.
And just listen to the natural language patterns, and then map them across onto the list of the things that you've got. Because I promise you, is once you start picking them up in day to day, you'll then start to recognize and go, oh my goodness, actually I'm hearing these all the time, and suddenly they'll start to stand out for you.
And you'll pick it up.
And you'll pick it up.
That's the thing. It's like thinking, do I need to know, like Arabella was saying, the exact name of that specific one, and
No, not to start with. Honestly, I would just say, listen to, maybe 5 minutes, and in there, pick a sentence that somebody's done, write it out, and go, okay, what presuppositions are in here? What Milton model pattern might this be? Look for the things like what's deleted in there. I mean, it's amazing when, we talk about this whole thing about plausibility. People say things all the time like, well, yeah, don't you? And go, yeah, we know. It's like, what do we know?
Yeah.
What do we know? That's delete. There's a massive deletion in there. All the time, myself included, we will say, oh yeah, well, do you understand what I'm saying? And people go, yeah, I understand what I'm saying. That's a deletion. What does that actually mean? What does it mean?
I do that all the time.
I have a perfect example. We were watching Snow White when my daughter was 6, and they said, take a bite of this apple, all of your dreams will come true.
Oh, there you go.
And my daughter looks at me and she goes, she's very AD, my daughter, and she looks at me and she goes, wait a minute, all of my dreams, even the bad ones? I don't think I'd take a bite of that apple. And I was like, oh my God. It was ridiculous, because you're presupposing that all of your best dreams will come true.
Exactly.
But she was like, no presuppositions here. She's super detail oriented. And I'm just like, so my job with her is always trying to liberate her and get her like thinking a bit higher. And then the other one, I'm trying to like bring her down. So make her like meta, like these are the details you need to finish.
Yes.
Anyway, so,
yeah. No, absolutely. That's a really good example.
That's a really good example.
Yeah. And you think about, so all of those kind of, Snow White's, all of the animated ones, they are brilliant to watch, to pick out these kind of things, because not only, you know, will you hear the language patterns, but you'll see the metaphors in there, visual metaphors, verbal, throughout the whole story. All of the stories are metaphors for other things. So yeah, I mean, watch those. And this will be a really good test, because when we talk about separating out process from content, you know, the content will be the story. So can you stay out of the story enough to notice the process of how it's all put together? Because it's really tricky, because we all get caught into it.
I don't understand that. Sorry, can you?
So for example, you know, I mean, well, you talk about your daughter. So a few years ago, my goddaughter, we were watching Finding Nemo. So she was about 7 at the time, and I was watching it, and literally I was like staring at the screen, totally focused on it. She was watching me because she was amazed that I was like so bought into this whole thing. But in my head, I'd been like, oh no, so he's got to get from here to this and do this, and what about his father and his friend, you know? And in my head, I'd built up all of this kind of like story about what had to happen. So I was filling in the gaps from watching this because of the way it gets set up. And depending on where your mind goes, that will be it. So it's the same as if I eat this apple, are all of my dreams going to come true, or are all the bad ones? You know, how come I was kind of like worried about his dad and the parents losing Nemo, and he'd got to go down this drain, and his scales would come off, and then, you know, I mean, it had all got, but she was just watching me because I was transfixed. Now that is getting stuck in the content because I wasn't paying attention to the process. Now, from an NLP perspective, we want to pay attention to the process of how it goes together, but the story pulls us in. And this is what happens when you work with somebody or when you're with a client. You listen to the story that they tell you, and then we forget to pay attention to the process of how they're putting that story all together. And when we become good at NLP, we can listen to both the story and know where it's going, and notice the process and know what's happening. Yeah. So when you work, so if I work with a client, for example, of course I listen to the story they're telling me, because, you know, they'll want to know that I've heard what they're telling me about. And all the time, I almost sort of like, you know, go into a bit of an uptime, and I pay attention to how are they saying these things? Where are the deletions? You know, how's the story distorted here? How can I challenge them better because of how they are describing their story, not what they are describing?
This is why I ask the athletes, because I'm not with them all the time, to send me post-competition reports that they send me just a quick email, just any bright things that popped up in your mind. You just send me how it went. Right. And that's exactly what I'm looking for, is not, I can see on the scoreboard where they won and lost. That is not as interesting to me as them saying, well, my first match, I was super stressed out, but then I recovered really well, but then I lost another one. And, you know, almost like they're making excuses for their whatever. You know, you can read into the way that they explain the results right there. Yes.
And then so they're then telling you the story of how it went.
Yes.
And then to get them to tell you the how. So if an athlete says to you, oh, this went really badly, how did it go badly?
Okay.
And then I recovered. How did you recover? What did you do? What was your process? That's the process bit, because, you know, then that will help your athlete to go, oh, actually, so I was, you know, it was all going well, something went wrong, and I recovered. How did I do that? Because I want to be able to repeat it next time. Was it just a fluke that I recovered and got my equilibrium back? Or was it a process that I used? And that's where, you know, us working with somebody will go, right, tell me what the process is. How are you doing it? Yeah. So that's the reason we kind of almost do this dual processing thing, is we are listening and watching and feeling their story. But the most important thing for us using this methodology is the how are they doing that? Because if we know how, we can help them change it if it's not working for them. If we just know why they're doing it, That doesn't help us.
Hmm.
This is the difference between psychology and NLP, really. Psychology is fascinating. I love it. I'm a psychologist. I love my degree and I study loads of it. However, psychology is very interested in why something happens.
Right.
Yeah.
That's yeah. So they ask, psychologists ask why.
Yes, they do, and understandably, because it's kind of like that's what we've been trained to do. Now, add in the how, and that starts to become a lot more practical in terms of changing things. So, you know, I mean, psychology is the study of behavior rather than anything else necessarily. So we might want to know is, well, you know, how is somebody behaving so that we can change it. If we don't ask those questions around how it's happening, we could spend, as some therapists do, a year working with somebody to find out why it all happened, but still nothing's changed. You know, and I think that's a very important distinction. I mean, the why is fascinating, don't get me wrong. I mean, you know, why is very interesting because we, you know, why does something work? Okay, great. Well, we know why it works like that. Now, what do we do about it? Yeah.
Okay, and then the how, once we've identified the how, and then now we're going to help them with changing it.
Yeah.
That's the bit we're going to learn next, right?
Well, you're already doing that. You're already learning it. Yeah, you're already learning that. So think about it. So, so
are you using complex equivalence by any chance?
Yeah, well, all of it, and also though is go back to the communication model.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So all the learning that you have around the communication model, if you are paying attention to how somebody's talking to you and they're telling you their story, they'll also be telling you in there, you know, the distortions, deletions and generalizations in their language, which you're hearing now, and also deletions, distortions and generalizations in, well, what else was going on at the time of that event? Because you think about it, if we all went to the pub tonight and we were there for 3 hours, and then tomorrow morning we told a different friend about our experience at the pub, there would be some similarities and some differences, but there'd be more differences in terms of what we remember and how we remember it than there will be in similarities when we dig down into the detail. Because those differences will be around what did we have to drink, what we were talking about, how did we feel at that time, you know, what was our emotional state, how did I notice Arabella and Shireen talking as opposed to Daniela and Vanessa. So Vanessa might look at it and see totally different dynamics. We'll all have very different experiences. That how is when somebody then starts to describe a situation to you, you want to know what else happened. It's almost like, what else did you miss or you are not telling me about that will be in there, and we just haven't got it yet. Now we've already started doing that, you know, and yes, there are techniques for all things that will be coming up. Now we're starting to get, with our language, a lot more sophisticated about how somebody's putting something together. Because think about the cause and effect and the complex equivalence statements. Those two sentences are how people make mountains out of a molehill. Yeah, so they are like, you know, that guy bumped into me in the pub. He wants a fight. Yeah, that's a complex equivalence statement. And so, you know, as an NLP practitioner, my immediate reaction would be is, how does that guy bumping into you in the pub mean that he wants a fight?
Right. Yeah.
You know, because he could have just tripped over a step that he didn't see and bumped into you, you know, or you know, his knee could have given way because he's just had an operation on it. I mean, we don't know, but we make mountains out of molehills because we put two things together and we link them, and then that's what gives us meaning, and then we say it out loud. this happened, therefore this. And so our job is to start challenging that. It's like, how, you know, in your head, you're thinking, how are you putting those two together? Rather than going, oh, right, okay, so what happened next?
Yeah. Would you recommend going, like, obviously, because I know it's very layered, this learning. Would you recommend going right back and listening to
Always.
everything?
Sure, we have a year, don't we? With this, it says we have a full year to go back and keep readings or whatever around that.
What I would suggest is, if you, which I hope you all have, but to have downloaded the MP3s, have them on your phone and go back and just listen to them and just keep listening over, because it'll embed it in you. You know, even if you're driving the car and it's kind of like on in the background, or you're walking to somewhere, just stick in a few tracks, and just because that will remind you, and the more the learning you get, you'll pick up more stuff from that. And you can do that passively. You don't have to necessarily sit down in front of the modules and re-go over them, although of course you can, and I would definitely do that. I mean, I spent an inordinate amount of time when I first did it learning all of this stuff, and then I went and assisted on lots of other courses because I knew I wanted to train it. Now, you don't need to do it to that level if you don't want to train it. The more practice you get, though, with everything, the more effective you become, you know. So definitely, you know.
I think definitely going, I think that will help to piece some of it together and just, like you say, embed it a bit more. But I think one of the things as well is, like, for me, working, like, I ideally want to work with runners, and now I find myself thinking, well, should I be perhaps talking to some of, because it's quite difficult to then think, what will their problems what are they going to come to me with?
You won't know. You won't know. Do you know what? I have been blown away with some of the things that I've worked with over the years, because somebody's come to me and they said, I've got a problem with my performance. And we've ended up in all sorts of areas, nothing related. Well, I mean, it's related to their performance in that it's getting in the way of them performing because they are unhappy about something, and it's been nothing to do with their sport whatsoever.
It's way deeper than that.
Oh yeah, way deeper. Now, I mean, and this is where you will have to make a call whether it borders on outside of your you know, scope of work.
Yeah.
Because obviously there are some things, you know, that if they go into the clinical areas, it's not for your, you know, it's to refer on.
Yeah.
However, there can be things that aren't trauma based as such, but it's still bothering them because they need to sort it out. And that once they sort that out, they've almost got the space, the capacity, and the emotional resilience to be able to deal with their sport or with their running. You know, but sometimes they just need to sort other stuff out.
Okay.
You know, I always start every session that comes to me that I have a new one. Once I've taken the demographic information, I've checked on kind of like, you know, this, that, and the other. I then say to them, right, I want you to tell me in your own words all the reasons that you are here. And they'll go, well, what do you want? Where shall I start? And I go, that's entirely up to you. And I keep it really, really loose, because what I want them to do is for them to come out with what is most important to them, not what I think. So even though we'll have had a conversation on the telephone and they'll say, oh, I want to work on this, and I go, okay, yeah, fine, well, blah, blah, and we do the session I always start it with that. And invariably, they'll start off with, you know, one thing or another. And then by the time I've spent 2 hours scribbling and my arms nearly dropped off, they've covered like all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And then, you know, very often when they come in for the, you know, subsequent sessions, I'll say, what do you want to bring today? And then they'll come out with something, and then they go, oh, this isn't what I thought I was going to talk about. And I go, well, that's interesting, isn't it? What's your unconscious mind telling you?
Yeah.
You know?
And I guess, well, that's giving you that time by asking that and giving them the floor, so to speak. It's giving you that time to obviously work out what, you know, their map of the world is and how they communicate and and everything. So
it is, but what it's also doing is giving them the freedom to go, do you know what my problem is might not be what I think my problem is. Because, you know, unconscious minds, if you think about it this way, your unconscious minds may have a very different agenda to what your conscious mind has, you know, because the conscious mind will want to keep things contained, and it want to be organized, and want to be, you know, and this is the reason sometimes it can take a number of sessions before somebody will even start to touch on what the thing is that's really bothering them. You know, so yeah, so I suppose in a nutshell I would say keep an open mind about what somebody needs, and what you are going to offer. You might not like that, because I know a lot of people, especially supervising some, you know, trainee sports psychologists in the past, they want a script, and that's what kind of like, you know, they're often taught to do, is plan what you're going to do in the session. You know, but that's can be quite tricky if that's actually not what the client wants.
yeah.
You know, but you'll find your own ways of working with the material in the way that's going to be right for you, for sure.
Can I ask something of the group? Even this is a quick question that maybe I don't know if this is in NLP territory, because I have a fencing student. She's never wants to do competitions. She's pretty good. She doesn't want to ever compete. And I asked her why not, because she loves competing against me, against everybody else. She's like a super tough, competitive little girl in the club. And she said she has too much anxiety and she doesn't want to do it. And I said, is this only in fencing, or does this pop up in other things like school tests and stuff like that? She goes, well, exams are easy because I can study the maximum I can, and I know I'm going to do a good job, but I don't know if I'm going to do a good job in fencing. And she's only 14, and I said, or 15, and I said, okay, but there'll be other things that you can prepare for, but aren't guaranteed, like interviews or you know, things in your future, you know, like from everything, relationships. And I said, do you think this is going to have an impact in those things? And she said, yeah, maybe. And I said, well, do you have anything that you're doing about it? And her mom told me she's seeing a psychologist, so that's great. And she said, well, this girl is like super close to me in the way that she really trusts me, and she's like a surly teenager, but then when she's fencing and stuff, she just becomes a different person. And I don't want to push her to do competitions, because I could care less if she does competitions, but I think the reason behind not doing it is quite important, you know, impactful for life, you know. And so I don't know what you guys would think. Is it outside of the boundaries of my ethics right now to offer her some, like, at least some strategies for understanding what's going on, or what?
Okay, well, I'll throw that open to everybody else first before I put my 2 pence in. So
to be honest, I've got the one person I have spoken to about some of this work that we're doing is a runner that won't compete. So my question essentially is the same as yours, Shireen, in that sense. It's, you know, how do we understand, is it within our remit of using NLP to actually explore that, or is it deeper?
I'm sure it is, and I'm fine doing it, because I know that I had some strategies that I can definitely give her the strategies. And I know nobody has, not one thing works for every person, but every person can have one thing that they can work on. I know this to be a fact, because even an idiot like me managed to get some stuff done in my life. And so I'm fine with helping her. I just don't know, when there's a psychologist already there helping her, I don't want to interfere, right? And maybe some of the strategies that I would give her would run counterintuitive to that. And because she trusts me so much, if I say, oh yeah, we should work together, she would just do it. You know, so I feel that I'm at a really, you know, strange position.
Yeah.
I need professional advice.
Yeah. Anybody else? Vanessa, Arabella?
I think I would probably be very transparent with her mother,
Sure.
and explain. I mean, I don't know if you already have, but I'm training NLP in this course. I have thoughts, but you know, I'm not certified. I'm not practicing, but these are my thoughts. But and basically just kind of repeat what you just said. You don't want, you know, that to there any conflict between what you're saying and your thoughts and then the psychologist, because obviously the psychologist is a professional. But I think, I mean, I don't know, I generally like to hear other people's opinions, even if it's not you know, someone telling me what to do. Just hearing other people's perspectives, because I think that's ultimately what it is. I'm sure, I mean, I'm clearly not a mother, but in fact, I probably won't say this because Vanessa's a mother, so I'm like definitely not the person to say anything about this. But sometimes it is useful having an outsider's perspective, because you can get quite lost in the environment, and yeah, that maybe especially because it's your child and you know, you're emotionally invested. Those are my thoughts.
Okay, Vanessa, thoughts?
You have the mom and the
mixed.
psychology angle.
I was mixed really, because I thought, well, the psychology side, if she's seeing a psychologist, you don't want to conflict with that. But then if she really trusts you, you might be able to have a sofa chat with her on a different level and say, and just cover off sort of, well, how would the fencing competition go in your mind? How do you think it looks, and how could it be the best? You know, and give that kind of support, and maybe a different angle to maybe alter her view of why she doesn't want to compete. I know we can't ask why, but you know, do you know what I mean? Do the, you know, and see if you can get into the little periphery areas, because maybe with having a psychologist, I'd be worried that the problems are a bit deeper than just.
Sure, and I don't pretend to be able to get at any of those problems. No, I'm
no,
super
but you
happy
could,
to. Professionals are there for a reason, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think everything that you've all said, I think is great. I think it's important that we do definitely think about these. So key things that I would just say is, yeah, you're absolutely right. You have boundaries with the psychologist. However, I don't know whether you have access to the psychologist in terms of talking to him or her about, you know, making sure that you're not crossing those boundaries and working with them so that you make it, you know, a bit more team based. I think so the thing that comes out for me is, what's interesting here is, generally speaking, something like this, if she doesn't want to compete, but she likes competing inside, it'll be about her ego, you know, and it's probably about what's the threat to her ego, what's going to happen to her when if she competes. Yeah. And so it's probably areas around self-worth. So, you know, how does she feel about herself, and does she trust herself? Now, you can, so, you know, both Arabella and Vanessa have sort of like mentioned the whole idea of maybe having you could talk with the mom, but also having those little talks on the side about maybe just helping her generally, which you don't need to go anywhere near any clinical issues whatsoever, about starting to help her to trust herself, to trust in her abilities and her capabilities as a player, and as a human being, and to help for her to feel situations where she can build her sense of self-worth. Because quite often the fear about competing, or the fear about competition, or why people get stressed, is because of the threat to an ego. So we all have an ego, and I don't mean necessarily the ego in a Freudian way. It's just, you know, our sense of self, who we are. And that competitive element is, if you feel you can control the competitive element, it doesn't impact on your self-worth. But when it's an unknown situation, as in somebody outside of the club or whatever, or somebody she may feel could injure her, not physically, but, you know, impact on her ego, she might not want to put herself in that position. So you could work in that peripheral way, like you know, Vanessa was saying, is having sofa chats or something like that, to help her to build her sense of self-worth and to trust in her abilities to go back to that rounded person, not just the athlete, but the rounded person that is, you know, that we're all there to kind of support as well.
I was actually exactly like that as a child. I did gymnastics and just flat out refused to do competitions. I was a cellist, refused to be in orchestras outside of school. The idea of putting myself out there just put the fear of God into me. Like I just couldn't, and even just to get to actually doing gymnastics, I had to sit in on a class, a few classes, and then decide to like join the group. And it wasn't just like, let's see what happens. It's more like, no, this is what they do. This is what, you know, the process of, or the schedule for the entire day is like. So I knew everything and then could make that decision and join the group. What did help me was breaking down and understanding exactly what would happen. Like, what would I need to know in order to be able to join that group, in order to be part of that orchestra? Like, what do I need? Is there something I need to be better at myself? So for orchestra, the fear of me not being able to sight read better as well as everyone else just used to make me sweat, and I didn't want to be called out by the conductor.
Exactly.
So how could I mean, I just gave up. My parents were like, this is not important. And they're both musicians, so they were like, whatever. But I did go to a few rehearsals, and it wasn't an issue, but I, you know, soon realized that actually my sight reading wasn't up to scratch. That's the basis of it, you know, and but it's that information and like, what do I need, especially if it comes from a fear angle.
Absolutely. And that's such a good demonstration of that, trusting yourself, the whole feeling of self-worth. And now you're saying that both your parents were musicians, you've got that comparison of where am I in relation to the two most important people that have brought me up so far. I mean, that's definitely going to be an ego threat situation for sure. So you know, these things work themselves out in the end. You know, point being that you've decided that you know you didn't want to go down that route, and that's fine. You know, but it's definitely all about that. So yes, I mean, and what will help her will be what helps her, but it's definitely about, because even if, see, and this is the interesting thing is, if we feel comfortable enough in ourselves to engage with something, even if we do fall short in terms of skills and capabilities, that's okay. If we feel okay in ourselves, like if our sense of self is strong enough, it's okay. It's when it's not, and it feels like it's really, you know, painful, horrible, nasty experience, that we just, you know, we just can't have that sense of self being damaged.
Yeah, this is why I have many friends who are like, they're not athletic, and they say, oh, I'm not competitive, I never wanted to do sports. You sit down and play a board game that has to do with intellect with them, and they will lose their shit. And I'm like, oh, you're not competitive? I'm sorry, did you just steal that piece of Trivial Pursuit pie from me? So
yeah,
so it just depends. It's like everybody has something in them, and it's not provoked in sport necessarily, but it's definitely provoked in something. Absolutely. Even within kindness.
Yes, no, absolutely. And also, and where you can watch out for somebody who manages that kind of thing of not wanting to be competitive, or somebody who will say something like, oh, I don't like confrontation, I like things to be nice and smooth, that's when the passive aggressive behavior tends to come out. So people will, they don't want to be seen as aggressive, they don't want to be seen as challenging, they don't want to upset the status quo, but they're annoyed and they're angry, and because they're not comfortable in saying it out loud, they'll tend to sort of like use passive aggressive statements, having a little dig, or, you know, and then saying, oh, no, I didn't mean it like that. Where that sort of behavior can come from as well. So that can tell us a lot as well if you hear that. So
no.
Just
don't worry about your cleaner.
just on that, Louise, obviously, I mean, just using Shireen's example, let's take the psychologist out of it. Let's kind of assume that there isn't a psychologist.
Your client, perhaps.
would you approach it still in that same, starting with the whole self-worth stuff? Would that be the kind of, would you be questioning around self-worth in order to try and identify the, not the why, the why she's so afraid of competing?
Yes. Yeah, and look, so let's just get this straight about the why. It's not that we don't want to know why something is happening, is we want to be careful how we ask questions with the why.
Yeah.
That's the important
saying why.
Yes.
She's like, oh God.
Exactly. But so the thing is, when Shireen started talking to me, hearing that, the first word I wrote down was ego. Yeah, because I knew it was an ego threat thing, because when we pit ourselves against somebody else, if we don't want to engage with somebody else in that way and we enjoy something, but we'll do it with others, and usually when we can manage the situation and know that we can either beat them or demonstrate a certain level of ability, or in your case, Shireen, it's because you are the coach and an ex-Olympian. There's no shame in not beating somebody at that level.
Yeah, you should see her fence against me. She's a little maniac.
Yes, yeah. So, and so the thing is that stands out. So I would definitely want to explore the reasoning behind why she wouldn't want to compete. Now, some people don't want to compete, full stop. Fine. That is not a problem in the slightest. Yeah. But if she's competitive within the club and with people she knows she can control the situation, then it is interesting if this is creating an issue for her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, it might be that so I would want to say is it a problem not competing?
No,
it's
not a problem. It's a problem because she admitted it right away why she didn't want to, and she's very clear about that, because it's anxiety. And I was like, well, at least she's not hiding from that.
Yeah, right? No, absolutely. I mean, the question if she said that, probably the question I would ask is, if you had no anxiety, would you compete?
Yeah, I asked because when her mom is there, she's very anxious. If her mom wants to film something, she'll just kind of stop fencing, petulantly, right? It's really funny.
Yeah.
But then she'll film with it's just her and I,
Yeah. So. Well, I mean, there's a lot of dynamics going on.
Yeah, I'm not getting too involved. I just wondered what the limits were, and I'm leaving anyways. We're moving. So, but she and I assume we'll keep in contact.
Yes.
So
to go back to what you were saying, Daniela, then, so let's say she came as a client, and I knew, and there was no other psychologist, so you're not creating boundary issues. Yes, I'd want to explore, what are her reasonings for that? Where does the anxiety come from? This is where the Milton model fits very nicely with this, simply because you will hear her doing comparisons, with better, worse, easier, all of those kind of things. This is where, when we pick up on the language, it gives us clues as to where the issue is coming from. And so, yes, I would definitely explore that. And then you might get to a stage where you go, okay, well, maybe we might want to work on techniques that help reduce anxiety. So some of the state management things. The thing is, this does sound like it is a deeper issue with the relationships with a mom, particularly. We often get this, in sport, it's like parents,
especially with children. It's I'm now thinking back to my younger years now, and thinking about probably some of the things that I know I've done in front of my parents, thinking, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like with the video thing that you were saying, absolutely. If I was being videoed, it's like, well, okay, no, I'm not doing the thing now.
Yes, no, absolutely. And so these are all questions that are raised, and dependent on the type of work that any of us do with whatever group. It's like, I suppose you can use all of the NLP skills in any area. You just have to make a decision on what your role is when you're working with an individual or a group, as to where you want to get them to.
Yeah.
I think part of the, if you want, Daniela, part of the first one, the mind read of, knowing the thoughts or feelings of this person might really help in the initial in the initial, talking about that, because this is what I have so many like shy, awkward kids that join fencing because they feel it's okay to be weird, and it's okay to be like, even some like weirdly aggressive ones. And I said, it's everybody. We all feel mean. We all have these, like, anything you're thinking, like, this person is horrible and I just want to shove this sword right through their stomach. I'm like, whatever terrible things you're thinking, I can guarantee you I've thought them before. It's okay. I'm like, they pass. And then I say, the important thing is to take a breath and to let it pass. And I said, and then you can come and talk to me about it, and you can just continue on with your sport. The important thing is not what you're thinking. The important thing is what's going on after that. Yeah. So, and that really helps the passive aggressive. I'm like, it's okay to be mean. It's okay to feel mean and to think mean. And then you can get on with your life, so it might help with the ego thing to be like, everyone, you don't think everyone feels that we are like going to die when we lose. Right?
Yeah. I just, I've got a few runners that I can think of that they're brilliant in their training. They go and execute all the sessions as they should, and they're doing all these wonderful things in training. You stick a start line in front of them, and all of a sudden they're not good enough to be there. And it does. I'm just thinking now back on it that a lot of people, it's the whole feeling of I'm not good enough to be on this start line.
So you can either, I don't know. I had some of this and I would remember. Sorry, I'm not. This is the last thing I promised, but is to say that, like, practice training with the anxiety, or practice making the competition like a training, because those are two like roads that you could go that will totally like change the state of their performance at least initially. For me, it was practicing with anxiety. I would have to get myself all hyped up and then just practice. And then when I felt all hyped up, I'm like, oh, I know this. And then it was okay. So these are all like little tricks that probably don't have much to do with what we're talking about now. Sorry, but I'm super passionate about that. I love that sort of like mind management in like stressful moments. It's so exciting to me.
To be honest, they're all related to what we're talking about here. And it's interesting that, because depending on somebody's belief system of what works or what doesn't, we'll all try different techniques. What I'd like to bring into this is to go back to what you said earlier, Daniela, about using learning stuff. If you've got athletes that are not wanting to compete, go back to the 5 main frames of NLP and think about and talk to them about cause and effect, results versus excuses, and ask them what they want. Because if they want to compete, they need to be at cause, and they'll get the results that they want. And if they get the results that they want, that they've set at the right level for where they are, then as long as they are not setting it at a stage which is too high, which is going to create a problem for them naturally, they'll be able to manage their language. So you've already got something that you can talk about to get them thinking, what do I actually want? Are they being put in a competitive situation because that's what their choice is, or what somebody else says?
Interesting.
Louise, you had said if we feel comfy enough with ourselves, it's okay to do something. And then I didn't catch the rest of it. I'm a terrible note taker.
Oh, I have no idea what I said.
Okay, I saw you look down and I thought maybe you had written it, and that's why during your notes. I thought you made a quick note of it and then you were reading it to us after during making that. Okay, never mind.
Well, just watch the video back.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure if I would have access to it, but yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other thoughts on this? Maybe sort of pinning into thinking about the language, or anything that you want to bring or discuss?
I thought the internally and externally reference points were super important.
Yes. Yeah.
For our work and also for my marriage.
Okay.
Holy hallelujah. Do not tell my husband how to properly clean a kitchen, even though he does a terrible job, because he will never do it again.
Okay.
He's the king of internally referenced.
Yes. Well, see, now this is very important for us when we work with other people or when we're a coach, because we think that everybody wants feedback. No, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they might need it, but they don't always want it. And if I mean, in an ideal situation, we'd be internally referenced with an external check. So we kind of know pretty much ourselves that we're on the right track. And we might want to tap in with somebody else just to make sure that we're not such a, you know, megalomaniac that we think that we're absolutely marvelous and we're just so off the mark. But yeah, there will be some people who are very internally referenced and won't want feedback, and those that are very externally referenced are your very needy people, constantly after feedback, reassurance, etc., etc. Yeah.
What was the book that Arabella was mentioning earlier? I wrote that question. What was the some speeches book?
It's called the 21 Speeches That Shaped Our World. It's because, do you remember in the module we're shown the rugby coach giving a speech? It's on that screen on that slide. It mentions, or maybe it's one of the resources or something, but it looks really useful, just an example to kind of go through and underline, certainly for me. Because I saw, so when I was looking through the Milton model patterns PDF, the paragraph at the end, or quite a few paragraphs, says putting it all together. That was really, really useful for me. So I think that's why I just need to spend some time looking at the book.
Good. Okay, cool, thank you.
Anything else? Anything that you would like explain? You've got the meta model to get onto, haven't you? So and what I would say is, before you do that, stick with the Milton model. Make sure that you are au fait with the Milton model. Yeah.
Wait, can I ask about metaphors? I finally understood at the end, because I studied literature in university, and I was like, okay, do I have to use like Dostoevsky to these students to get them to understand metaphor? I'm like thinking of like reading The Little Prince, like one of my husband's coaches did all the time. He would read The Little Prince to his players and say nothing, just read it. A paragraph every week. And they would just have to sit there and think about it. Now it's my husband's favorite book. So I was like, what kind of metaphors do I need? And then it said you can use stories from your life, but just use as metaphors, or stories from other people's lives, just use as metaphor. It doesn't have to be like two dogs are walking in the forest or anything, does it?
No. So a metaphor basically is, what you're thinking about with a metaphor is, you want to give a message to somebody, but you don't want to say, you don't want to be direct and explicit about the message. So if you're giving if you wanted to talk about, you know, how to improve something in fencing, you're not going to talk about improvements and you're not going to talk about fencing, but you're going to use a metaphor that unconsciously will trigger somebody's, you know, thinking in the background, to get them to think about improving in their fencing. All of these fairy tales we talked about previously, they are all metaphors. You know, so I mean, one of my favorites is Shrek. So I love Shrek. I think it's a brilliant film. It's a great metaphor, which throws a lot of our original thinkings on its head about, you know, the beautiful princess, you know, you kiss her and suddenly she turns from this ugly princess into the, you know, a beautiful, you know, blah blah. Well, with Shrek it's kind of like turned on its head, and actually she remains in an ogre form, and it's all that, but it's all about how, you know, things are built in terms of relationships and who people are, and not judging people by books and all of that kind of stuff. It's all metaphorical. Everything is metaphorical. So if we want to tell a story, you're telling a story with a message in it, but you're not making the message explicit. And as soon as you make it explicit, it's not a message and not a metaphor, it's just a story. Yeah,
got it. It's just a bad sermon on Sunday morning.
Yes. Well, yes. So if your vicar or your priest or your whoever came in and said, I'm going to talk to you about, you know, I don't know, staying faithful to your wife, and then, you know, or your husband, and then starts telling you a story about, you know, somebody having an affair, that's not a metaphor. But you might tell a story about, you know, the
swans mate for life.
Of what?
Swans mate for life. for example?
No, because that's it. That's even too close.
Okay.
Yes, too close. So you might choose something like, so he'd come in and he'd start telling the story about maybe, I don't know, like a farmer who, had lots of crops that works and I don't know. And, and then he found that he kind of like, he looked over the fence and he liked his, neighbours' crops better, so he started to take those neighbours' crops and plant them, but he found that actually when he started planting those in amongst his own, his crops started to die and his crops didn't work very well. I mean, I don't know where I'm going with this, I'm just making it up at the top of my head, but what people might do is when they're sitting listening is if their unconscious minds makes the connection about, oh, actually, do you know what? The farmer's looking at something that's a bit better over the fence and he decides to have a little bit of that. But it didn't work out because all of his crops died. They might think twice about maybe doing something else. But as soon as the vicar says, I'm going to tell you a story about being unfaithful in your marriage, it's ruined it, because we go, oh, yeah, look, see, that's what the farmer's doing. He's being unfaithful in his marriage. But if you don't tell anybody what the story's about, people sit there, they get absorbed in the story. They're not thinking about what this might mean. They just go, well, this is a really interesting story. What's all this about?
Yeah, good. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So if you want to tell a story to your athletes, you're probably better to choose a story that's not about competition, winning, performance, improvement. Otherwise, it's not a metaphor. There's nothing wrong with giving them, motivational, examples and what have you, but it's not a metaphor.
Okay.
Because the metaphor is working at the unconscious mind, because it's getting rid of the critical conscious mind where somebody goes, oh, see, look, she's trying to tell me that I really need to be a good farmer and I shouldn't go messing with somebody's crops next door. Well, I'm not going to listen to that, because the conscious mind has got involved in being critical about the story. Yeah. Whereas if you're just telling a story and the unconscious mind's listening, the unconscious mind at some point may or may not pick up on what it is that the message is. Yeah. We will, when we do the 3 days, I'll be getting you to do some metaphors, so you'll have an experience of doing that then.
I actually had a question about the 3 days. Like, I mean, I'm sure we'll probably get this down the line, but kind of like what the structure, like
that's down the line. All I would say is, we're getting into too much detail here. Yeah, so it'll be 3 days of training, going over stuff, getting you to do stuff, lots of applied practice of the material. Yeah, and I know this may disappoint some of you, but I think it's going to be the October dates that seem to be the ones that are most people can make more. Sorry, I know Vanessa, you wanted the middle one, but I think there's only you and somebody, about 2 more that could do it, so sorry. I will put a note up and say as confirmation at the end of this week. So yeah.
So how many of us will there be?
Well, hopefully there will be you 5 if you can make it, all of you. And then I think there'll be 7 from another group. So there'll probably be about 12 of you, which is a really lovely group size.
And where is it, just so I know, planning wise?
It'll be in southwest London somewhere.
Okay. So if I fly into London, that's reasonable?
Yeah. So probably Heathrow or Gatwick. Yeah. And there's a couple of others that are flying in as well. So it might be that what I might do is sort of see if I can get you all at the same time, so you could, because then it might be easier to share a taxi or something in rather than get public transport, that sort of thing. But those are logistics that we can sort out at a later date. Yeah.
Where are the others flying in from?
Oh, not so exotic as Italy. One's coming down from Newcastle and the other one's coming from the Isle of Man.
Oh, okay.
I'm coming from the Isle of Hot Man.
Oh. Well, in that case, bring a few over with you. Just to keep it entertaining, Sorry, Paul, I know you're going to be watching this.
Oh, don't worry. Paul is definitely comfortable in his own skin. It's okay. He's not gonna have any ego frights after this, I'm sure.
No, I doubt very much you could have an ego fright. Right. So anything else that I can help you with tonight?
I think that's fine for me. I've done a lot of listening and talking.
Yes, we have. And
So
it's what?
there's a lot of, I think, like Arabella said, it's a lot of information in this, in those kind of last 2 modules. It's a lot to take in.
And I did pre-warn you on the
Yeah, that's something that I was just constantly repeating to myself, like, this is a lot of information, we fine, or fine. It's okay.
It is okay. It is okay. It will settle in. So what we will do is we will have small group seminars as per the information before. So I can't remember exactly. I think I said from next Monday, trying to maybe get one in next Monday. What I might do is, because we've got the bank holiday, haven't we?
Ah, yes, we do.
Yeah. Everything's kind of, so let me just have a look at it in terms of timings, because I want you to have enough time to be comfortable with the Milton model and then do the meta model before we have another tutorial. So it might be that rather than do it week commencing the 30th, we do it maybe the week after, either the Monday or the Tuesday, the 6th or the 7th of June.
Is this for you and the 3 ladies there?
Well, and then one for you and Paul. So the small group tutorials. So maybe looking at those 2 days.
Sure. Either day is fine by me, Monday or Tuesday. 6th or 7th is fine.
All right, good. So 6th or 7th, have a little think about that. And then in your group, if you just have a quick talk and then come back and let me know when would work, then we'll do it on those then. Probably on the 7th, to be honest, I can do the morning of the 7th, but I can't do after that.
Fine by me. If Paul can do that.
Okay, just to pre-warn everybody. So
Okay.
I'll summarize that on Slack then. Good. Okay.
Thank you, everybody. This is so useful, I must say. I'm also really, I'm very much getting not only my money's worth, but also my time's worth. So thank you, ladies.
Good.
Your hard work.
Actually, speaking of that, when you don't do it, when you used to do it before COVID, when it wasn't virtual, it was all in person, was it just over a week? Because in my head, I'm thinking, how on earth did everyone digest this?
Yeah, well, we used to do it we'd do it in 3 blocks of 3 days. And then we went to doing 2 blocks, but because in the 3 blocks of 3, I'd also include the hypnosis and the timeline, which I don't do on this because I just can't do that online. It's just, so yeah, do you know what? I must admit, I was surprised. I didn't think doing it online would work as well as it has, but the other 2 groups, we've had really good feedback, and you guys seem to be getting on with it really well. And I think it's because, to be fair, because I spent a year videoing myself and then another year putting it all together, to the point where if anybody said NLP to me ever again, I would have killed them because I was so sick and tired about doing it. I think you get all of the material pretty much. So you can do it in your own time. So yeah, I know it's just a different way of doing it. It's a different way of doing it. So but I think coming on the 3 days, I think you'll experience a little bit of, bless you, what it's like to to be in the live training, which is also good because you get the energies of everybody else, and that is really positive. So so good. Okay, right. Great. Well, look, I'll let you get on then. So enjoy the rest of your evening. So I will see you probably in a couple of weeks' time as opposed to in a week's time. So that will give you time, and I'll summarize it now so the information will be up on Slack.
And there's no module release this until after that week, is there?
Well, no, because you've got module 11 released, haven't you? The asking killer questions. So yeah, no, I will do the next one after that. So you've pretty much got some good time now. Yeah.
So we don't need to do module 8, outcomes and goal settings.
I don't think that's released yet, is it?
No,
No,
we
you just
have
need to
some-
make sure you've done module 7C.
7C. Cool.
Yes,
Yeah.
before the next tutorial in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha.
And then when you've done that, then we'll release your outcomes and goal setting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Super.
Good.
Fantastic. Thank you
you.
so much.
Yes, lovely to see you all.
You all too.
Yeah, I'm going to go off and have a little scratch.
All right, good.
Oh, no.
See you soon.
Yes, see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.